There's a moment most people don't notice when they slowly start disappearing from others' lives. Not because of a fight, not because something clearly went wrong, but because being around people starts to feel exhausting. Conversations that once felt natural begin to feel like effort. Messages sit unanswered, not out of anger, but quiet hesitation. And without realizing it, you begin creating distance. At first, it doesn't feel like loss. It feels like relief, a controlled kind of silence, where no one expects too much, no one disappoints you, no one drains your energy. And that's where it becomes dangerous, because it doesn't feel like isolation. It feels like peace. But what if that peace is just the absence of something you've been avoiding? People don't usually see this clearly. From the outside, someone who starts cutting others off looks simple to define: distant, cold, difficult, even ungrateful. It looks intentional, like they've decided they no longer need anyone. But that's rarely how it actually begins. What looks like rejection is often a reaction, a quiet accumulation of moments no one else noticed, being in a conversation and realizing you're not really being heard, wanting to explain something and choosing not to, letting small disappointments slide because they don't seem serious enough, but feeling them stay anyway. Nothing dramatic, nothing worth confronting, but not nothing. And over time, something starts to shift. The effort to stay connected begins to feel heavier than the connection itself. Conversations feel repetitive. Expectations feel draining. And being around people starts to take more energy than it gives back. So instead of confronting it, you slowly step back. Instead of explaining, you become distant. Not to hurt anyone, but to protect something in you that feels worn down. And that's where it gets complicated, because it can feel like strength, like you're finally choosing yourself. But what if it's not just that? What if something else is quietly forming underneath, something that doesn't stop at distance? This kind of distance doesn't usually start with a decision. It starts when something in you gets tired in a very specific way. Not physically, not even obviously emotionally, but in the quiet moments where you realize you're always the one adjusting. You're the one understanding, the one letting things go, the one keeping the peace even when something feels off. And you don't react to it right away. You tolerate it. You tell yourself it's not a big deal, that it's easier not to explain, that saying something might just make things worse. So you stay quiet. And each time you do that, something small gets used up. Not all at once, just enough that you don't notice it happening. Until one day, the way you respond to people changes. You don't feel the same patience, the same willingness to explain, the same energy to keep trying. Not because you're angry, but because something in you has quietly reached its limit. And that's the part most people misunderstand. By the time someone starts pulling away, they're not reacting to a single moment. They're responding to a version of their life that slowly drained them without ever feeling urgent enough to fix. And here's the uncomfortable question hiding inside that. When you start stepping back from people, are you finally protecting your energy, or are you becoming someone who no longer has the capacity to connect the way you once did? And then something changes in a way that's hard to explain, even to yourself. It's not just that you feel tired. It's that the things you used to prioritize don't feel as important anymore. Staying in touch, replying just to keep things smooth, showing up out of obligation. You still understand why those things matter, but you don't feel the same pull to do them, because now every interaction has a kind of weight to it. You start noticing how much energy something takes and whether it actually gives anything back. Conversations that stay on the surface begin to feel pointless. Small talk feels heavier than silence, and certain relationships start to feel like maintenance, not connection. So without making a clear decision, you begin to reduce. Fewer replies, fewer explanations, fewer moments where you stretch yourself just to keep something going. From the outside, it looks like you're withdrawing, but from the inside, it feels like you're finally being selective, like you're protecting something that matters. And in some ways you are. But here's where it becomes difficult to see clearly, because the same instinct that helps you protect your energy can also start to shrink your world. What feels like clarity can slowly turn into a habit of avoiding anything that requires effort. And not all meaningful connections are effortless. Some of them take patience, discomfort, even misunderstanding. So the question isn't just whether you're choosing what matters. It's whether, in the process of filtering out what feels empty, you're also filtering out the very things that once made your life feel full. At a certain point, this isn't just about exhaustion anymore. It becomes about control. not in a loud or obvious way, but in a quiet need to feel steady again. Because the truth is, relationships are unpredictable. Even the good ones. They come with misunderstandings, unmet expectations, moments where you feel off balance without warning. And after enough of those moments, even small ones, something in you starts looking for stability. So you create it by creating distance. Because when fewer people have access to you, fewer things can go wrong. Fewer chances to feel disappointed, misunderstood, emotionally pulled in directions you didn't choose. And at first, it feels powerful. You decide when to engage, how much to give, when to step back. No pressure, no surprises, just control. But here's where the shift happens. Instead of learning how to handle discomfort, you begin to remove anything that might cause it. Instead of saying what you feel, you avoid the situation that would require you to say it. And slowly, that becomes your default. Distance becomes easier than honesty. Silence becomes easier than explanation. And it works. You feel more stable, more in control. But at the same time, something else starts to disappear. Because control can protect you from discomfort, but it can also prevent the kind of connection that only exists because of it. The kind that requires misunderstanding, effort, even risk. So the question becomes sharper now. Are you setting boundaries to protect your peace, or are you building a life where nothing can reach you deeply enough to ever disturb it again? At some point, the peace you created starts to feel different. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavier than it used to be. Because the absence of conflict slowly becomes the absence of everything else too. The conversations that used to fill your day, the small random messages, the familiar voices you didn't realize you relied on. At first, you don't notice it. The silence feels intentional, controlled, but over time, it starts to change. You pick up your phone, and there's nothing waiting for you. No one to reply to, no conversation to step back into. Days feel a little more repetitive, a little less shaped by other people, and the space you created to protect your energy starts to feel harder to fill. Then another feeling shows up, quieter, but harder to ignore. A question you don't always say out loud. Did I go too far? Because even if stepping away made sense, the need for connection doesn't disappear. It just becomes distant, less obvious, more difficult to reach. And this is the part most people aren't prepared for. You can remove the stress, you can remove the pressure, you can remove the emotional ups and downs, but sometimes you remove the moments that made things feel alive too. Not all at once, just enough that life starts to feel a little more muted, a little more empty in ways that are hard to explain. And that's the trade-off no one really talks about, because the peace you built is real, but so is what it cost you. At a certain point, this stops being about other people and starts becoming about you. It's easy to explain distance by focusing on what others did wrong, how they didn't understand you, how they disappointed you, how they made things feel harder than they should have. And sometimes those reasons are real, but they're not always the full story, because there's a quieter question underneath all of it. When you started pulling away, what were you really trying to avoid? Was it the people or the way you felt around them? The moments where you had to say something difficult, the moments where you had to be honest and risk being misunderstood again, the moments where connection required discomfort, because distance solves something very quickly. It removes the situation. You don't have to explain, you don't have to open up, you don't have to deal with the tension that comes with being real. But it doesn't resolve what was underneath. It just leaves it untouched. And over time, that doesn't disappear. It becomes a pattern, a way of relating, a quiet instinct to step back instead of step in. Until one day, it's not just certain people you're distant from. It's the part of connection that requires vulnerability at all. And that's the shift that's hardest to see, because it feels like peace. It feels like control. It even feels like growth. But sometimes, it's just distance that learned how to justify itself. People don't just disappear from others' lives for no reason. Even when nothing was said, even when nothing looked serious from the outside, it's usually built quietly, in small moments that didn't seem worth addressing at the time, but never really went away either. And sometimes, it's not even about other people. It's about a shift inside you. A point where peace starts to matter more than connection, where clarity feels safer than complexity, where control feels better than unpredictability. And in some ways, that makes sense, but it also creates something harder to notice, because no matter how independent you become, there's still a part of you that responds to being understood, that notices when no one reaches out, that feels the absence, even if you chose it. So this isn't really about whether pulling away is right or wrong. It's about whether it's conscious, because there's a difference between choosing distance and slowly becoming someone who lives inside it. And that difference is easy to miss until one day you realize the space you created to protect yourself is also the space you now exist in. If this video felt a little too real, like it was putting words to something you haven't fully been able to explain, then there's probably a reason for that. A lot of what we talked about today isn't obvious. It's quiet, gradual, easy to miss while it's happening. So if something in this made you pause, even for a moment, take that seriously. And if you found value in this perspective, you can leave a like or subscribe for more videos like this. It helps this kind of content reach more people who might need it too. But more importantly, just take a moment after this ends. Sit with it, because sometimes understanding what's really going on beneath the surface is where change actually begins.